Hello everyone and welcome to the 6 Foot Networks YouTube channel. My name is Tom and today I'm going to take you through a brief tour about OpenDirectory and setting up an OpenDirectory server, as well as binding the very first client to it. We'll even create some user accounts, and then as a bonus I'll show you how to archive your OpenDirectory configuration so that in the event of a disaster you can come back and restore it. Here we go, let's get started. So for this intent and purpose, I'm going to be using VMware Fusion, which is a go-to for me when it comes to, doing examples and firing up machines in a moment's notice. So I have two systems here. One is the server. You can see the server app's already installed, and I went through the wizard to get it to this point. This is the client machine that we're going to actually bind to this. First thing I did, you can see I did run the DNS service, and I created two records in here that'll basically allow OpenDirectory to resolve to itself. So here's the host name, there's the A record, as well as the reverse zone. So this is all on a VMnet. That's why the IP addressing is kind of weird like this. So let's go back to this. You can also see that I'm using macOS 10.13.6 because I believe the server app peaked at 10.13.6. And with 10.14 in Mojave, the server app was stripped. A lot of functionality and services went away, and it really this is really the last version that you'll be able to do this in. So, and what's great about this is you can use a newer client. So you can see that this one's 10.14.5, which is currently in beta. 10.14.4 is public release at the moment. I use this virtual machine for testing and other things. But what I was saying is 10.14 will allow you to bind to an OpenDirectory server that's older. So if you have a 10.13.6 server running with all these services configured, or any of these services configured, if you were to upgrade this machine to 10.14, you would actually lose a lot of functionality here. The server app in macOS Mojave has been stripped. There's a video on it. I'll point a link to it in the description. Anyway, moving forward. So first thing I did, DNS, I already mentioned that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the wizard and create an OpenDirectory master. So we're going to turn this thing on. You get three options. You can create a new OpenDirectory domain. You can join an existing OpenDirectory domain as a replica, or you can restore the OpenDirectory domain from an archive. And this is the disaster recovery bonus that I'm going to show you later. But remember that this feature is here because, say this server dies for whatever reason, disk failure, otherwise, you can go to another Mac and configure its server to be an OpenDirectory master. And at that point, you would just click this box, hit next. It'll ask you for the compressed archive, and then you can restore that, and your OpenDirectory services will be restored on a new machine in minutes. So for this example, we're going to create a new directory domain. We're going to give the directory administrator a password of just dir admin for this example. Please do not lose the directory administrator's password. Although you can reset it, it's a nightmare, and you lose a lot of functionality if you don't have this credential. Sometimes it's easier to just start over with OpenDirectory and rebuild your entire OpenDirectory infrastructure if you lose or forget, or you take over an OpenDirectory domain that was managed by somebody else. It's easier to just write down all the users or export them somehow and repopulate them. I usually keep a running spreadsheet of users anyway, so that way you can keep track of this. But if you forget any of this, you can always recreate the OpenDirectory domain. Relatively easy. So we're going to hit next, and for this example, we're just going to use 6 Foot Networks as the example, and we're going to use our support line as the admin email address. We're going to hit next. confirm, looks good, set up. So now it's going through and creating all of the databases and configurations that this virtual machine will need to run OpenDirectory. All your users and groups and configuration slots for XAN and whatnot will all be created now. So we'll give this a second. Okay, so now you can see we have a master. You can see its IP address here, which is the local host. And at this point, we have a functioning OpenDirectory service. Now, there's nothing really in it. See, it's blank, no groups, and no users. So what I'm going to do is, just as an example. Oh, and by the way, this drop down, so you have local groups because the computer has a built-in users and group function as well. And then you have the network groups, which are stored in OpenDirectory. So whenever you do anything with OpenDirectory, you really want to make sure that this drop down's on local network groups, because otherwise you're going to have a problem. So you see there's a couple of buttons down here. You can either import groups, export groups, you can do templates, as well as you can lock the system. This lock will enforce the directory admin account. That'll be the only account that can unlock this lock. So right now it's unlocked. We'll leave it as such because it's a new install and this is only for testing purposes anyway. However, once you get going in production, you will want to make sure that that's locked when you walk away from your system. So let's do a couple of groups just for fun. So in my purposes, we're going to create an admins group. Okay, maybe we can create an executives group. And you can see that when I hit tab, it'll actually populate the group name. Group name is always lowercase, as with usernames. macOS is built on Linux. Linux enforces lowercase users and groups, although the friendly name can be whatever you want. And they don't have to be the same. So, for example, if you want, engineers, right? You can actually take this down to ENGs if you want, right? There's no rhyme or reason. You can just create your group names as you wish. So I'll just leave that. And then for users, we'll just create a couple of, make sure that this drop down's on, because otherwise you'll create your users in the local max directory and they'll never be visible. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. So learn from my mistake and make sure that this drop down is always on local network users. So here you also have the option. See, Apple gives you a failsafe. If you forget to check the one that's back here, you can always check this one. So full name, I'm just going to put my full name in here. Right? Account name, Tom. Password, my last name. Just for fun. Now, here you can check the user to administer the server. This will be a redundant backup to the dir admin password. Now, because I've set this user account to administer the server, this account will now also be able to handle any account functions that the dir admin account has. Now, if I'm dealing with services only where I want the user to say only connect to DNS or DHCP or whatnot, then I would drop this down to none services only for home folder. But because I want the user to be able to log in local only to whatever machine, like say this one back here, you have to make sure that this is done. Otherwise, it won't log in. It won't let you log in. Here you can also assign a quota if you fancy disk quotas. I don't like fixed disk quotas. I like the ability to stretch and grow as I go. And although with this you can, in theory, do that, you tend to overrun disks anyway. So it's easier to just have the user clean up their machines. If not, I reimage the machines 2 or 3 times a year, maybe 4 times a year, depending on the client. and that way they're clean, they're fresh, and they're usually patched all the way up to date. Here you can add any keywords and notes, user account, user account created on May 5th, 2019, right? So, create. It'll do its thing. There you go. Now you have a user. It is an admin because I checked the box. And it is in the OpenDirectory system. That's why it took a little bit to populate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create test user 1. My S key is sticking. Or my shift key is actually sticking. So test user 1. Test user 1. And I will just leave it as such. And then you can see that any non-admin user will not have anything in this type field. So the other thing you can do from here is if you right click on this, you can basically give advanced options. You can actually create aliases, so if you want somebody to be able to just log in with the letter T, you can. You can change the path to home folder. Say you have an AFP server that's running, a share that has everybody's home. You can put it there. Not sure how I would. I've never done that because I always feared that in the event of a network hiccup or something, you will have a bunch of users that'll flock to your desk. So I just usually allow local users create mobile accounts on the system. So we have test user 1. Let's do test user 2 too. Test user 2. Password test user 2. Test user 2. And then create. So now we're going to go into our groups and we're going to double click that. Here you can add mailing lists, so if somebody sends an email to the group, they'll receive it. You can also allow non-group mail to arrive, etc. And in this version, you still had the ability to create a group wiki using the wiki service here, which was nice. Members, if you just hit plus, you can start typing the person's name and it'll show up. Now, honestly, I started with my first name. You can also start with your last name and it'll fill it in. It'll do a match. So we're just going to hit OK. So I am the admin, right? I am the admin. Test user 1 will be the engineer. And test user 1 and 2 are going to be executives, as well as me, just for fun. So now you can see that we have members in each group, and it's now pretty much set. Now you have a running OpenDirectory master, right? You have groups created that you can add to services, and you have users within the groups. Now, some of you, if you're not familiar with directory services, you have to think of this in scale. So if you have, say, a user base of 1,000 users that are going to use, say, 300 computers. So this is just a rough example. Being able to add a group to a service, so say you want, if you were to strike up VPN services here, you could actually set up, permissions. So you could say some users, here you would say executives, and you could say admins, and you could say What was the other one? Engineers. Right? So now you've just given, even though this isn't configured, only these three groups can access the VPN service running on this computer. And guess what? They're dynamic. So as you go in here, you can remove anyone at will, and the group will automatically reflect in the services. So basically, each service you set up groups for, right? And I can also dynamically remove groups from VPN. I can also add the users in. So if you're a small, client-based firm, or if you have, a very small business that wants to run directory service, you can either use groups or the username. I prefer groups because then I just know that if I need somebody to access VPN services, I'll make sure that they're in the executives group. And that's it. Or you can create a group here that says, VPN users. Why did I write YPN? VPN users. I have to clean this keyboard. And then let's make this. I'm not doing too well typing today, so I apologize for that, folks. VPN users. And then I could just say OK. Underneath here, I can say who do I want access. I want myself to have access. And then OK. And then hypothetically speaking, if this server was also our VPN server, I can go in here, fix this, add plus VPN users. Now anybody that's in the VPN users group will have access. So kind of a sidebar, but it works out. Okay, so now we have, just to recap, we have a working OpenDirectory master. We've created users and groups. And let's see, we have also done a little sidebar about adding a group as a access point for permissions. Now I'm going to go back to this client machine here. I'll leave this one running. I'll actually drag this one down so it's a little bit out of sight and out of mind. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to show you how to bind a client to this OpenDirectory master. So what we're going to do is we're going to open System Preferences, and you can see I have dark mode enabled from Mojave, and I'm stoked about it. I love dark mode. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread for me. So under System Preferences, we're going to go into Users and Groups, and here we're going to unlock it because we need to have admin rights to it. So let's give this a second to catch up to me. Unlock that. So if you're hearing fan noise in the background, that is my my Cisco ISR router that appears to be having it's in the corner, and I believe it has heat issues. So I'm gonna have to move that whole stack of network gear that's in the corner, because every couple seconds it spins up and then it spins back down. It sounds like a one of those bomb shelter sirens things that you used to hear back in the day, where they would sound the sirens at noon on Sundays, and it's kind of weird, but that's what it reminds me of. Anyway, so now that we're authenticated to this System Preferences pane, we're going to click on Login Options. You can see I have a local admin user account here that allowed me to create the virtual machine and log in. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under Login Options, and you can see this network account server here. We're going to hit Join. Join is going to bring up the initial directory utility configuration little tool here. Now, there's three ways to deal with directory services on a Mac natively. Apple supports OpenDirectory natively. They also support Active Directory natively, as well as LDAP v3. So if you're running a Linux environment and you have an LDAP v3 server running for users and groups, you can bind to that. You can bind to Active Directory, which is Microsoft's directory services implementation, as well as OpenDirectory. So for this purpose, I'm going to show you how to get to the other two. So if you click on Directory Utility, you will see that once you unlock this with your local admin, these services will become available. So you have Active Directory and LDAP v3. You know, for our purposes, I'm going to go back here, and we're just going to do a drop down. So OpenDirectory auto discovers OpenDirectory servers, so it already found our other server on the network, and here it is. And you should really go forth and make sure that your host names do not end in .local, because Bonjour uses .local, and this should really be a fully qualified domain name, which is fine. I just don't have it. I don't have DNS set up on this machine, and it's using Bonjour to discover the server. I should really have set the DNS to look at this DNS server, but for time constraints, I'm just going to skip by that. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. Okay, so the drop down, we drop down to the server. We're going to hit OK. Server provides an SSL cert. Do we trust them? Yeah, why not? You know, we set it up. It's our system. So we're going to trust it. We're going to put in our password here in a second. When it comes up, there it is. All right, come on. There it is. I didn't give these virtual machines too many resources to work with, so that's why they're a little draggy, but it's okay. This server does not provide a secure SSL connection. No, it doesn't, because we didn't set this up for security. We set this up for example. So once you get through this, it'll receive the server information. It'll ask you to it'll ask you to put in your password to allow it to change the configuration for directory services. Once you do that, there's your server. So now you know you have access to this server. And actually, I don't know if you noticed, this last line appeared. So for example, if you have a server like, say, a VPN server that you just set up, and you're using the VPN group to access services, that server doesn't have to sit on the OpenDirectory server like I did here. You know, when I did the VPN configuration here, this could be a totally separate server that's running the server app and VPN service. But what you want to do at that point is you want to uncheck that box. The reason is because if you don't want anybody but local admin to be able to log into the server to administer it, then you want to check this box. But if you want, or uncheck this box, if you want, say, the executives to be able to log in, you can actually specify that here. Groups, I can say the executives can log in. So anybody in the executives group can log into the server, which this is the way that I implement servers normally. I normally have a super user group that includes me and the local in-house engineer who, you know, he and I work in tandem, or she and I work in tandem, and we will be the only two in the super user group that can log into the server as ourselves. For logging purposes, you want to know who's coming and going. So this is actually the best way, I believe, so to do this. And then you hit done, and you're pretty much done. So what we just did was we bound a computer to OpenDirectory that we set up from scratch. We created some groups, we created some users, some test users, and the way that you can verify that, yeah, see, that's what I was going to show you. When you hit edit, it'll now show you, instead of the drop down, it'll show you what server you're connected to, and you can see it says here that it's an OpenDirectory server. What's great about this is if you go into the directory utility and under directory editor, you can actually, oh yeah, it's already set because there's only one service. You can actually see the users. So there's your dir admin account, test users that we created, and the one that I created for myself. Now this is on the directory utility on the client, not on the server. So you can see this pulled all that information. Now, also here it says that I'm not authenticated. If I were to authenticate using my dir admin credential, now I'm authenticated as dir admin. I can also lock that again, and I can log in as myself. I forgot what my password was, which is very bad of me, but I don't remember what I created, so it's okay. But usually when you do remember your password, which I hope you would do, you'd be able to go into dir admin and then dir admin again for this example's purpose, and then you're authenticated. You can actually add fields to this, add records, and go down that road. You can also see the groups. So I was looking at users. There's groups. I don't know why you're asking me for that, but I will give you permission. Oh, VMware tools. Yes. Okay. I should have done that beforehand, so I apologize for this. Boy, that fan is really going. And it's not even that hot in here. It's 71 degrees in here. I try to keep my office relatively cool with the help of an exhaust fan and the building air conditioner. I'd love to set that thing to 68 degrees and have the whole building be 68 degrees, but when you have other people in here, that's not really conducive. Everybody's walking around with blankets and robes, and you know, it's 95 degrees outside, but everybody's with leather jackets and stuff on inside the house. So anyway, so you can see that we can see all the groups that we created: VPN users, executives, engineers, as well as the admins group. So it's kind of neat. If you have computers listed in here, you can see the OpenDirectory masters, and so on and so forth, as well as their IP address, UIDs, MAC address. There's some pretty good information in this utility. But anyway, that is it. And I'll go back to system preferences real quick just to show you what you would see if you were to just connect to a machine that's bound. You would literally see just that. And with that, you can log into this machine. For the sake of this virtual machine, I'm not going to log in as one of the users because I would then have to recreate this, and I don't want to have any additional. This virtual machine is pretty clean, and I don't want to have any additional records or anything in it. So I will just leave it as it is. But if you were to, at this point, log out of the local admin account and log in, actually, you know what? Why not? Assuming that I can. Oh wait, let me make sure that I didn't block myself. Oh, that's right. I was going to show you how to archive your OpenDirectory master. Thanks for reminding me. So while this is doing that, I am going to go over here and show you how to do the OpenDirectory master. Once you have an OpenDirectory master set up, you got some groups, you got some users in it, you can actually go here to this little wheel and you can archive the OpenDirectory master. And what this will do is literally create a compressed archive of the contents of OpenDirectory. Not OpenDirectory as a whole, just the contents. So what you can do is you can just specify OD archive and then choose where you want it. I will put it on the desktop. OD archive. Save it. Provide a password. This is usually where I provide the dir admin account password. So diradmin, diradmin, because that's easy enough to remember and it's tied to something. You will then proceed, and it'll actually create a sparse image with your Open Directory master. Now you might remember, and there it is, right there. Now you can save that to a cloud drive or someplace where it's safe and secure. It is password protected. You will need the password you just created, you just used to create it, to unlock it and populate the restore wizard. Now, if you recall, during the initial installation of Open Directory, there was a box that said restore Open Directory from an archive file. There's your archive file. You would click that button, point it to this, provide the password, and voila, your Open Directory is restored. What's great about this is, say you're upgrading computers, say your computer dies or something happens and you need to rebuild your Open Directory environment, you're not populating, you know, hundreds if not thousands of users back in with their passwords, because you won't know the passwords. Or you shouldn't know their passwords, I should say, for security purposes. It would be best to do an archive, say, I usually do them once a month because a lot of users don't come and go at my sites. It's really up to the client though. For myself personally, my infrastructure, I do it once a year because it's just myself and a few of the guys. They come and go, so I uncheck their boxes for access. So actually what you can do also is allow user to log in if, say, somebody gets laid off, fired, or whatever, or they take a break. Log in, just uncheck that, hit OK, and then it says that the account's disabled. That way you can make sure that if they have VPN access or whatnot, they can't get in, but all of their information remains, so their password stays, and all the usernames, if you have them in groups for access to other services, everything stays the same. They're not allowed to log in because they're gone and they shouldn't have access. Now the other thing you can do, of course, is you can edit your password policy. Every time you see a tool like this, you should explore it. So you can actually do all the standard password policy settings here, as well as create template from users. So if you want, say, a user template, an admin template, and a super user template, that way all you have to do is just create username and password. It'll apply everything else to that user account. Here's also how you change the password for the user account. Here you can also export the users. How do you want to export them? Here, let's select all of them. Export users. Tells you that there's 3. You can do all of them if you want, or you can just do selected users. Export. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do in this that will make your life easier. And then if you preview this, you can see what you get. So there's Tom, there's test 1, there's test 2, test user 1, test user 2, and it also tells you where the home folders is. So you can create a list of all your users, and then if need be, you can, let me get in there. I didn't want to export again. I want to import, and then you can import that back in into the network directory, users.txt. Shows you right here, local network. Make sure that you put in your admin password, and then voila, Bob's your uncle. Okay, I did not intend for this video to be 35 minutes long, so I apologize for that. However, I hope you got some good information out of it. I believe I've covered pretty much everything there is. There is one more part of Open Directory that I did not cover, and that's the XAN component of it. I am working with various vendors right now to see if I can get some storage, some loaner storage, because setting up an XSAN requires fiber attached storage, as well as some fiber channel switching and the cards and the I/O and whatnot to get it to work. So until I have that, I will not be able to do a real XSAN demo, but I do have screenshots of some that I've taken, so maybe I'll kind of conjure something together and do a voiceover with that. Not sure. Let me know down below what you think of these videos. I'd love to chat with you guys and you know, bounce some ideas back and forth, and hopefully you know, you guys will either give us a thumbs up or subscribe. We'd love to grow our community and provide quality content as we go. So if there's anything you guys want to see us do, drop us a line. We'll try to do it. If not, we'll just engage in conversations, and we can even take it offline. And I've already interfaced with a few of our subscribers offline and provided some documentation or notes that I've done in the past for a specific setup, and you know, it didn't cost me anything except for writing an email, which I do 1,000 times a day anyway. So please reach out. We love to grow our community. You know, we do this for you guys, and we hope we get, you know, good feedback from you. And we actually hope that you guys get something good out of these videos. If they help you out, like I said, give us a like, drop us a line, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for everything, and take care, and until next time. Bye-bye.